The power of vulnerability and why you should start being more open today. So, one of my biggest insecurities growing up, ironically, it was my teeth. Man, kids were mean. Kids are always mean, to be honest. But kids were really mean when I was growing up. And, my teeth, they weren't the best, right? They were a little crooked, they were a little jagged. They just weren't perfect. And as a result, I just didn't smile a lot. And actually, this was one of the reasons why I was such an introvert. I just didn't want people to see my teeth. And the best way to do that is to not speak. And this caused me to start to lose some of my confidence. I can remember in middle school, one kid used to tease me. He used to say, "Man, Philip, what did you have for breakfast? Rocks?" And it sounds funny now, right? I can look back on it and laugh. But at the time, it wasn't funny. It was something that really like crushed my spirits, crushed my confidence, if you will. I can also even remember in middle school, there being a girl that I liked. And I remember she told me, or rather, she told one of her friends to tell me that she didn't like me. And the reason why is because I didn't have straight teeth. And this was something that I struggled with for a long time. And actually, one of the things that helped me to break free of this was one day I went to the grocery store. And I remember I was checking out, I just grabbed some Gatorade and some Skittles, so nothing serious. And there was this elderly lady that was at the checkout line. And as I was checking out, she says, "How are you doing today?" And I looked at her, I smiled, and I said, "I'm doing fine." And then she goes, "Oh my gosh, you have such a beautiful smile." And I looked at her, I was like, "Really?" Because that was something that I never heard before. And she said, "Yeah, like you have dimples." And I was like, "Dimples? Like what are those?" And she said, "Yeah, you have these little like dents in your cheek." And I never knew I had these because I never smiled. So I rushed home, I looked in the mirror, and I started smiling. I was like, "Oh, so I do have dimples." And ever since then, I've been someone who's just been smiling at any opportunity they can get. If you were to ask my clients, they would tell you, yeah, Coach Wells, he's always smiling. He's almost always happy, if you will. And that's just because, man, this is who I am. Like I allow myself to really smile and embrace all my imperfections. There's even a song by J. Cole. It's called Crooked Smile, if you will. And I absolutely love that song. So why am I telling you guys this story? Well, one, I want you guys to know that hey, we all have insecurities. And who knows, there may be some insecurities that I currently have that I may not know about. But I want you guys to know that I'm human. Even though I'm a therapist, I have things that I think about that aren't the best. I have insecurities that I have that, everybody honestly has, right? Like I'm not this like perfect person that doesn't experience, discomfort, if you will, right? I wanted to share that story because I wanted you guys to feel more closely connected to me. I also want to show you guys that your pain points, the things that you think are the ugliest points of your life or about who you are, it actually is probably one of your strengths. And we'll start to see this as I go through these 3 points. And actually, I start off with this point. But before I do, make sure you subscribe to this channel. So this point I wasn't going to put in here, and it's actually not in my notes. But if you're someone that loves storytelling, if you're someone who loves marketing, if you're someone that just simply loves building camaraderie, right, with other people, one of the best things you can do is share a story about a time you lost, a time that you failed, about an insecurity. Share a story that isn't having you as this superstar person that has won this, gained that, has been successful. Don't share those stories first, but be willing to share the stories where you're not the hero, where you've gone through some type of hardship. And at the end, maybe you do accomplish whatever goal you were originally trying to accomplish, but make sure you stress the down parts of your story. And the reason why is because people feel more connected to that part of the story than the highlights of your story, because those down parts, it gives people hope. So again, that was just a bonus. Wasn't one that I was going to get into. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into point number 1. So point number 1 as to why it is very powerful to be vulnerable is that when you're vulnerable, it shows that you have high levels of trust with the people around you. And when you show them that you have a high level of trust in them, they will in turn give you that same high level of trust. And this all goes back to a simple persuasion tactic called the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity is simple. If I give you something, you're going to feel indebted to me and thus give me something in return. This has recently happened to me when I took my wife out to celebrate her graduating from school. So we went to an all-you-can-eat buffet, if you will. It was a Brazilian steak buffet. And I asked the waiter, hey, can I get a slice of cake for my wife? She's celebrating and things like that. So she says yes, and she gives me one, but she doesn't charge me for it. And I was like, oh man, this is awesome, right? Free cake. Who doesn't like that? And what happened next was that she told me, if you would like to leave a review, my name is Diana, and you can just simply go to Google and leave me a review. And normally I don't leave reviews for anybody because I'm a busy person, right? And you're probably a busy person too. But because she gave me that piece of cake, I now felt indebted to her. But also, I love the fact that she went above and beyond. So I was like, of course, I'll give you a Google review. And I sat down for maybe like 2 minutes and I typed out the best Google review I could think of. But again, what does this go to? It goes to the law of reciprocity. Being vulnerable is something that we all know is tough. And the reason why it's tough is because no one wants to be judged. No one wants to give the other person ammunition that they can use to fire back at us. And then one way to not give them ammunition is to cover up those pain points, to not share anything, if you will. But by not sharing, it prevents you from developing a deep bond, a deep level of intimacy, or as I said, a deep level of trust between you and the other people. So one of the most powerful things is being vulnerable. And the reason why is because being vulnerable helps you to create trust within the people that you're talking to. So whether it's a new customer, a new coworker, a new boyfriend, new girlfriend, or just simply a new friend, be vulnerable if you want to create trust fast. Point number 2, and I absolutely love this one. Being vulnerable is one of the fastest ways to developing confidence. And more specifically, what you're developing is a high level of self-acceptance. When you're able to look at yourself, flaws and all, the good stuff, the bad stuff, and even the stuff in between, if you can look at all of you with the way of, let's say, compassion, acceptance, if you're able to look at yourself with a level of appreciation, this will help you to be able to take and accept everything about yourself and not try to hide certain parts of who you are. And when you share that you're, let's say, going through a divorce, or that you have crooked teeth, or that you grew up and you were poor, or maybe something even tougher, like you've been addicted to, let's say, alcohol, and now you're 1 year or so into your sobriety, right? Like things like that, those really heavy stuff. What it does is it shows you that you're not afraid to tell this part of your story. And that is one of the first steps into acceptance, one of the first steps into healing. And now this is something that I wasn't going to share, but I share this with you because you made it this far into the podcast. So there's actually 4 levels of acceptance. So the first level is acknowledge. The second level is allow. The third level is accept. And then the fourth and final level is to appreciate. And when you share these tough parts about yourself, these ugly parts about yourself, right? The ugly, not so, let's say, pretty parts about yourself. This is you practicing self-acceptance, acknowledging and accepting that this is who you are. Again, flaws and all. And this part, right? Even with the first point that I made, but definitely with this part, being vulnerable is something that you're not doing for other people, but you're doing it for you. When you are vulnerable, you're boosting your confidence within yourself. It's telling yourself that these things that I used to tell myself that are bad, that I should cover up, they're no longer things that you're afraid of. And main point number 3, the last and final point, and again, thank you for making it this far, and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Main point number 3, being vulnerable is the best way to create a support system. And the reason why is because when you're authentic, when you're being vulnerable, it truly serves as a filtering system for everyone that's around you. Because when you put out your authentic self, you will naturally attract people, but also repel people. And if you do that over the course of time, you're going to look up one day and have nothing but the people that are right for you around you. This is something that I actually learned within my marketing, because a few years ago, I was working with clients that honestly, I didn't enjoy working with. And as a result, it made me not want to be a therapist. But when I started to tell my story, whether it's through my podcast or through my marketing, I started to naturally draw the right people that would appreciate my services. And now almost 100%, I will say 100% of the clients that I work with, I really enjoy working with them, thus making work not feel like work. But you can do the same thing even in your personal life with your friends, your family, your loved ones, so romantic relationships. One of the best things you can do is be vulnerable. And it truly is a win-win, because if someone doesn't like you for you, trust me when I say eventually they're going to find the real you. And you do not want to waste time putting up this facade, being someone that you're not. Who has time for that? Maybe you do, but I definitely don't. And if you feel like you don't either, let's just cut to the chase. And the best way to do that is by being vulnerable. So what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm gonna recap the 3 main points to being vulnerable. And here's again, the bonus that I gave is that when you're doing marketing, by being vulnerable, it actually attracts the right group of people, okay? And again, that wasn't a point that I was going to make. It actually is when you share the stories about when you haven't won, when you failed, that is when people feel more closer to you than the times when you have won. And the reason why is because it inspires hope, and a lot of people can connect and relate to the down parts rather than the highlights. So main point number 1 that I made is being vulnerable is the fastest way to creating high levels of trust. This goes back to the law of reciprocity. The second point that I made is being vulnerable is one of the best ways to boost your self-confidence. And the reason why is because we're practicing self-acceptance. That is very, very big. And I really hope you take that point out of all the points from this podcast. And then point number 3, being vulnerable is the best way to create your ideal support system. And this can not just be a support system, but even your ideal working space, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a working professional. By being vulnerable, you literally filter out the people that are for you, but also the people that are not for you. So this is Coach Wells, and thank you for checking out this podcast.